I'm going to learn the Maimer that the Rebbe said, Yud Aleph Nissan, on the occasion of his birthday, his 82nd birthday, exactly 40 years ago, on the 11th of Nissan, 5744. And as we'll see in the Maimer, and as we've been discussing, the Kviyus, the days of the week, which the significant days fall out on this year, is like it was that year. The Parshas were different, although that year was a leap year. Additionally significant is that it's, of course, 40 years, which gives it a special effect, special strength, special significance in our lives, in the fact that this Torah has been here for 40 years, and therefore it has a very potent effect in each and every one of us. The Torah of the Rebbe, because he is sharing and giving this energy and Torah, this wisdom which comes with the instruction for our life. Torah's Chaim Hira B'Chaim. The Torah is called the Torah because it means Hira, instruction, lesson. So this is also not only a lesson of advice, but it's an Asinis Koyach. It gives us strength when we learn Torah of the Rebbe, especially at the time of the year, and with this extra energy and power of 40 years. That being said, Yishalcha Nissan Tavshin Daled Mem, Ki Yishalcha bincha mocher leimer mo'edus v'achukim v'hamishpotim asher tziva v'ayelekenu eschem v'amarta levincha v'adam hayinu lefare b'mitzrayim. The Maimer begins with a passage from the Torah in Deuteronomy, a portion of Vaschanan, which is also mentioned when we retell the story. And there the instruction is, God says, when your son will ask you tomorrow, meaning in the future times, to say, what are these testimonials and these statutes and these laws that the Lord our God has commanded you? So he's asking about, what's it all about? And you will tell your son, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And that's, of course, how we start after the 4 questions, as is well known, that, and as we say in the Seder, in the Haggadah, in the passages that we read, we say that the Torah spoke of 4 different types of children: the wise, the wicked, the more simple one, and the one that doesn't know how to ask. And this is the question of the wise son, and the answer that we give is that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God took us out, etc. So God tells us what we have to say. V'hinei inyan zeh hu ascholas hamaymer harishon d'maymer Pesach d'mamori Pesach l'chak mochadmur v'shnas hei tovshin. Now, this verse in Torah, in this passage, is how the Rebbe's Rebbe and father-in-law, previous Rebbe, began his Pesach discourse, the first Pesach that he was here in these blessed shores in the United States when he came to live here in 1940. So his Pesach discourses began with this verse. It's interesting just to note that the Rebbe, and of course the Rebbetzin, was not yet here in 1940 in Tovshin. The Rebbe wasn't here for Pesach in 1941 either. He came after Pesach. As a matter of fact, he came even after Shavuos. And the Rebbe, nevertheless, of course, is teaching these Mamorim. The Rebbe learned it from the writings, from how Chassidim wrote, how the previous Rebbe wrote it. And all of us, we could learn Torah and share Torah. Now, of course, we're not on the level of how Rebbe shares Torah, but a tip of the Shemetz Minhu, Rebbe gives Torah, we all have to share the Torah. Okay, let's get into it. So this is how he began the verse in 1940. Now the Rebbe just says parenthetically here, this is when he came to this country, and that year was also a leap year, 1940, Tovshin, 5700. It was a leap year, like this year, the Rebbe says, like 5744, which parenthetically is, of course, like this year, 5784, when we're learning it. And then Pesach again was on a Monday night, like it was on 5744, and like it's this year in 5784. The Rebbe says that this is the beginning of the 45th year since then. So it had been said 44 years earlier, and in 5744, they were beginning the 45th year since that mimer was said. So we're beginning the 85th year. V'hinei mashmo sa'inyin, and now the Rebbe gets into it. What's it all about? Ha'shayla ki Yishalcha bincha hu dover ikri v'haschola di'inyone Pesach. It comes out that the question of when your son will ask, that's a primary part of the Pesach ceremony, of the Seder, and all the matters of the Pesach, of Passover. And we could understand this even more so. We find that the sages have taught us, and the Rambam brings this as the halacha, Shemishi yeshli ben haben sheil. If someone has a son, then their son should ask them. V'meinli ben, and if you don't have a son, ishtoi sheyeles, his wife should ask him. V'im lav, if a person doesn't have a wife, chabei sheil, their friend asks. V'im lav, what if somebody's sitting themselves at the Seder? There's no other person there. Harehu sheyeles atzmei, person has to ask himself. So the Rebbe says the mashmos inyan hu shetzorach liyas inyan hashayla dafka. This means that there is a particular need for there to be a question. It has to be in the format of a question and an answer. Even if one is sitting themselves, they have to ask the question, and then they have to ask the answer. We have to understand why it's like this. The question of the son and the answer is one detail in the Passover matters. In other words, we're going to have to, the Rebbe is going to go on. Yeah, first of all, the biblically prescribed mitzvah that we have to eat matzah. Everyone has to eat matzah on the night of Pesach. It's a very unique mitzvah. Then there's the rabbinically introduced mitzvah of drinking the 4 cups of wine, grape juice. More than that, the whole reason why the child asks, and the questions are referred to, of course, as the manishtana. Why is this night different? It comes as a result of eating the matzah, right? The child asks, why this night we're eating matzah and we're not eating bread? The child asks the other question. First, he asks why we're dipping it, and other nights we don't dip. Why are we eating bitter herbs? Why are we leaning? So if the question is a result, then why is it looked at as such a primary important thing? It seems to be that you have to perform the mitzvah, and then the kid was going to ask questions. Why are we doing all this? And then you'll have the answer. But instead, it says before we do anything, the child has to ask, and then we do all that stuff. So we got to look into this. So in the explanation that Rebbe says, you can take it right, you can take it to the bank. Like Shimon Achman says, take it to the bank. It is well known that at the time of the Exodus from Egypt was the birth of the nation of Israel. As is explained at length in the prophecy of Ezekiel, at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, each and every individual Jew was born from newly born. V'chol Am Yisrael, the whole nation as a whole also was born at that time. We experienced a rebirth. V'inyan zeh choyzer v'neir midei shona b'shona b'chag HaPesach. And this repeats itself, and it's not only reenacted and reactivated, and it is marked each and every year at the time of year when we have Pesach. And that's the reason for stressing the fact that there has to be a question and an answer on Pesach. Because a question and an answer illustrates the idea of education. When children learn, there are questions, there are answers, and that's the way things are presented. That's the primary idea of education, and it's what it's made up of. To educate somebody who doesn't know. And at the time of the birth of Israel, it's very befitting that the concept and idea of education should be stressed. That's the reason why the beginning of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe's discourses on the first Pesach upon his arrival in the United States begin with the words of when your son will ask. This is a very primary idea generally on Pesach. And then if we get into it even more, in more detail, it begins with the question that the son will ask. It says, when your son will ask. Then it says, what does the son ask? It says, Moha Edus. What are these testimonial mitzvahs that you're performing here? Shishaylas ben Chacham. So that's, of course, the question of the wise son. How do we know? Because he already knows that there are three categories of mitzvahs. He knows that there's the testimonial mitzvahs that commemorate things. He knows that there are the statutes that we wouldn't have come up with on our own, and that they don't necessarily have something logical and something that we may understand, like we discussed several weeks ago about the red heifer. And then he knows that there are mishpatim, there are laws that make sense, that we may have even come up with on our own. He knows all this. Kedisa b'Yerushalmi, like the Talmud, Yerushalmi, tells us about which one of the sons says which one of the times. So the Torah tells us 4 times in the Torah that when your son will ask. So why do we start with that? Because first of all, everybody amongst Israel is considered a chacham, a ben chacham, the wise son. Kamesha Kosov, like it says a couple chapters earlier than this, in the same portion of Oschanan in Deuteronomy, Rak am chacham v'novin hagoy hagodl hazeh. We're exclusively just a nation of wise and understanding, this great nation. And therefore, when it's the time of the birth of the nation of Israel, the beginning has to be with the idea of education. So now the Rebbe basically addressed why did the Memorim start with that. And now the Rebbe will go into some of the concepts that are discussed subsequently. And this is a continuum in the Memorim of 1940, of 5700. It was a continuum of several Mamorim, and the Rebbe also said some more subsequent to this Maimer based on those Mamorim. So, he explains in the continuum of the discourses the EF Shalemar you can't say that the question is what is the idea of the testimonials, the statutes, and the laws in its simplest way of understanding, and that's because we say he's already a chacham, so he already knows this. So he's really asking, what's this all about? He wouldn't be called wise if he's saying, what is this? So he already knows these categories, and now he's asking to delve deeper into this. So the explanation is that even though he knows the three categories in amongst the mitzvahs of testimonial statutes and laws, he recognizes and knows the detailed differences amongst them. His question is, why did God, the Lord our God command this to you? Or the Rebbe brings alternatively, like there's a second version in the first Haggadah that was printed, and this is also the version that the Rambam says, like God commanded us, not just in our Haggadah it says Eschem, you. And it's interesting to note because that's part of the discussion. We say that the evil son says you, and we say he excluded himself. So the obvious question is, so did the wise son in the way we have it. But it happens to be in the first printed Haggadah, in other versions it says us. That's a separate discussion when we're looking into the text of the Haggadah. But the Rebbe mentions it here in the passing parenthetically. So why did God command mitzvahs elu, these particular mitzvahs, kidlakamon, as we will explain subsequently, the Rebbe says. Now the Rebbe brings more of the explanation, which the Rebbe taught. The hine hagam sheyesh chiluk bein edus chukim mishpatim mikol mokim yesh tzad hashav b'neihem. Although there are differences between the testimonials, the statutes, and the laws, nevertheless, there is a common denominator amongst them. So first we have to explain the difference. That the testimonials mitzvahs are the mitzvahs that testify. They are the witnesses of events that happened. The chukim hey mitzvahs she'ein lahem tam, and the statutes are the mitzvahs that don't have a reason. They are statutes and laws, decrees. And the laws are the types of mitzvahs that make sense logically and they have a reason in our understanding, in our intellectual understanding of things. All these three types of mitzvahs we have in the Passover laws. In the laws of Pesach, which is also called the festival of matzahs, the Chag of Pesach, the festival of Pesach is a testimony and to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Hainu initial Eidus, that's a testimonial mitzvah. And it also has the idea of a statute, like it says, this is the statute of the Passover offering. That's just the way God dictated it, and that's it. Like we learned a few weeks ago, the comparison between the red heifer and the Passover offering, they're both called chukim. And it also has things of laws, like we learn in the Talmud, in Psochim, so he said to Rabbi Nachman said to his servant, a servant that his master lets him out to freedom. What should he say? What would he be required to say? He should tell him thank you, praise him for letting him go. It means that in our intellect, And even in the understanding and intellect of a servant who is mostly uneducated, especially in those times when this story happened. We understand that a slave who's being freed has to be thankful for his freedom, and that he's free from the servitude. And since Passover is a general yontif, and it's the first one of the three festivals, and it's also the preparation for the receiving of the Torah, like when God met Moses for the first time, he tells him, when you take the nation out of Egypt, they will serve God on this mountain. So that's a reference to Mount Sinai, because that's where he met him the first time. So since Pesach is really the first, it's our birth, and it's the first time that we have something, so we have all three categories of mitzvahs associated with Pesach. The testimony of the matzah, which is the testimony of the Exodus, right? They didn't take along anything, they just had the dough baked, etc. And the Passover offering, which is the statute, and the praising of God that we were miraculously let out of Egypt, which is understood. So that will be a regular law. And then, so this at its source, we have all three types of mitzvahs. Because Pesach is a general, it's a birthday, it's a general thing. The yesh mitzvah shalem amru. So again, going back to the categories, there are mitzvahs that the sages have taught us. That the one that's called a statute is called a chukah. Chukah chokakti gzera gazarti. I have now the word chokakti. The word chukah means engraved, because it's something. It's just like we say, it's engraved in stone. It's etched in stone, right? So I have made a statute, I have decreed a decree. You have no permission to even think about why or what, or question it, so to speak. Not only is it not connected to the intellect, it's the opposite of intellect. It doesn't make sense. Not only, it's not just something that you might not understand, but you may really not understand. And then there are mitzvahs that make sense. If we wouldn't have the mitzvahs, there may be anarchy. There may be things, we understand a lot of the mitzvahs of humanitarian aid and different things, or even things of the civil laws. They're quite understood. The yesh mitzvahs, the edus, shehem ben chutz u'mishpatim. Then there are the mitzvahs that are the testimonial mitzvahs. That's sort of an in-between, between the ones that we understand very well and the ones that are statutes, because how to commemorate something God decrees, but that it's a commemoration. I saw a joke, someone said, if we would have been let out of, if we would have been slaves in whatever they go to, add which place, and what would be eating to remember it, right? To remember the Exodus. I think they wrote, if it would be Morocco, some kind of a Moroccan type of sandwich type thing. And if it would be, well, maybe if we went out of Japan, we would have eaten sushi. I don't know. Anyway, so matzah is matzah. No, all jokes aside. The point is that there's something that God said, this is how you have to do it. So, but the fact that we're remembering makes a lot of sense. How to remember, that's already more on the chukah side, the decree. So that's why it's an in-between, so to speak. Because it's to testify for an occurrence that happened, a particular occurrence, it's not possible to say that they're just a decree and a statute and a decree which have no reasoning. First of all, the mere fact, a lot of things happen to us. You don't have to remember this occurrence, which occurrences that we have to remember, that's also part of the mitzvah. And how to remember is also part of the mitzvah. As a matter of fact, it's anything that you have to testify about, it's because everyone else didn't see it. Or wherever the hearing is taking place, the people didn't see it. So therefore somebody has to testify and say what it is that we're talking about. So naturally that means that it's something that is hidden, and that's now going to be revealed by the one who gives the testimony. Like it's explained in those discourses by the previous Rebbe, he mentions the idea that there's no such thing as testimony on something that's very clear. So nobody goes in and says, now it's daytime. Because everyone knows it's daytime. And also, there's no such thing as testimony on something which everyone's going to know very soon. We'll know if you go check, you have to see something that was determined or something's going to happen. So you can't testify about that either because it didn't happen yet, or everyone's going to know about it anyway. But something which is not known, so then you need testimony so that people should know about it or be able to remember or know what it's about. What's the common denominator? They're all actions, they're all deeds that have to get done. They're all positive commandments. Actually done with physical things. The eating of the matzah, the bringing of the offering, and the giving of thanks. So just like by Pesach, the testimonial, the statutes, and the laws of Pesach are actions, deeds, things that we actually do. Achilas matzah kipshuta, actually eating matzah. Shtiyas hakoises, drinking the cups of the wine, actually, kipshuta. And so also the statutes and laws of the Passover offering and the time that the Beis HaMikdash was standing. So that was done physically. So now the Rebbe says this is the idea of what the wise son is asking about. This is what it's all about. Why do we have to do this with a nitty-gritty? Actually, physically. Why can't we just talk about it? Why do we have to do it? Why do we have to go through the motions? Why do we have to do all this? And that's what he means when he says, that the Lord our God commanded you, eschem daike. You, meaning, not that he's excluding himself, but you, the people that were there at the time of the Exodus. Before the Exodus from Egypt and before the Torah was given, the way we served God was very spiritual. Sometimes people say, I'm very spiritual. I don't know what to do. Sometimes you ask somebody to put on tefillin and say, I do it in my heart. There was a time when things like that were done in the heart. But now, God gave us a Torah to actually do things physically. Get it done. Nitty-gritty. And even the parts, when there was physical objects involved in the performance of the mitzvah, the physical object didn't become holy. Whether it was when the forefathers did it or somebody helped somebody with something, they didn't have a way to make something sanctified, to make it holy. And like our sages say in the Medrash, all of the mitzvahs that the forefathers did, they were like like fragrant smells. Hainu shehoyu inyonei reach v'ruach. It was spiritual. It was like smell. You can't touch it. You can't see it, but it's something that you could take in. So it's a spirit, like a smell, and the spirit. Inyan hashayich l'ruchnius and neshama. Something which is more connected to the spirituality of the soul. But when it's the time of actual, after the giving of the Torah, that, like it says in the Song of Songs, with the actual oil, the actual physical essence, etc., oil flowing, that it's done with physicality, with objects, etc. Now we can understand the depth of the wise son. Because he knows the greatness of the Exodus and how advantageous it was and how special it was, not only materially that they left Egypt, but spiritually, that they got the Torah. The idea was that it was an exodus from limitations and boundaries. The word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, also spells in Hebrew the word Mitzrayim, which means limitations, boundaries. So the exodus means that we were able to break free from hindrance of being able to perform mitzvahs. Ad l'mayla mayla, till one could strive higher and higher, as it's explained at length in the Sharamuna, the gates of faith, from the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Doriber, the second Rebbe, over Kitzer, Reremes B'Lukut Torah, and in a more abridged and shortened version, a digest version, in the Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe, of the first Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman. Then we also left the boundaries and limitations of the 10 Sfiris, ad le'eser Sfiris hagnuzes, till the 10 very hidden Sfiris. We discussed a few weeks ago too the idea of the creation and everything within the scale of worlds goes through 10 Sfiris, the 3 intellectual, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and the 7 emotional, kindness, severity, etc. And every stage has those Sfiris. Chassidus also talks about these Sfiris being within God in his essence before creation, and in a certain sense that doesn't make sense, because if God used that for creation, so that when God is in his essence, there's no necessity for that, and there wouldn't be 10 Sfiris. But everything that was created in God's image, which therefore Chassidus explains that therefore somewhere within God, even though his essence is just one and unified and singular and not able to be divided into any other things and described and defined, nevertheless, within God's essence there are those things, the way they can come out later into character within creation. So then there's also the 10 hidden Sfiris, which are these very deep levels. And this therefore brought out a further stage in creation when we left Egypt. So God then took us out of Egypt to give us the Torah. And like the Haggadah says, that the king of all kings, revealed himself to them. The Holy One, blessed be he, himself on his own, and he redeemed them. Right? The Haggadah there says not through an angel and not through the other types of servants and angels. So Chassidus explains that, And Rabbi Rashab, whose yortzeit is today, explains, Dahainu malchus v'tiferes shalamayla min hatzimtzum. When God came on His own, what would that be? So it will be the third sfira, which is tiferes, which is made up of chesed and gvura together, kindness and severity together, and malchus, the female sfira, which is made up of all the seven, including itself. And when we line them up, they both line up in the center. Not getting into it, especially since we don't have a chart here, etc. But there's some that line up on the right, some that line up on the left, and some that line up in the center. Tiferes and Malchus both line up in the center. And to even take it a step further, let's leave that thought for a moment. So this would be Malchus and Tiferes. That are even before God made the contraction and concentration that was needed for the creation. In other words, the way it is within His essence. And now, like we just mentioned, it's a bit of a dichotomy because we say higher than the tzimtzum. Why are there spheres? But there are, because that's what His essence is, and He shared His essence to create. But it's not on any level the way we can perceive it, the way it is after creation. It's the way it is within God, in His essence, that can ultimately become this. So, this level, when it says God in His essence came, He Himself and no one else, to redeem them, it's these two pieces. The Tiferes and the Malchus. And now, within God, since God is infinite, then the levels on every level are infinite. So therefore, Malchus and Tiferes together, Shteyem Yachad, Shezeu Inyan Na'ale B'Yosef. This is a very lofty level. The Rebbe will take the Rebbe's word for this at this point. So it's the way Malchus and Tiferes are fused in that level of before the Tzimtzum.
So it's like the middle part?
The middle, but now don't forget there are a couple more that line up in the middle, like Das and Yisoid and Keser, if we're really, and it's not mentioned here, but it's somewhere, but it's sufficient to say that Rebbe is a very high level, lofty, extremely lofty. Sometimes the Rebbe would refer to Hecher and Hecher v'Hecher. It's very high, and then there's higher than high. You know, the Google Maps didn't always show us everything, right? It's enough that we know there is in existence such lofty levels. So, yep. So Lefika Godla Tmiya Maya Shachs Ditzis Simon Veda Gashmi's Davka. So now the wise child says the Exodus was such a great thing. So we're getting in touch with such lofty levels of godliness, and we left the servitude in Egypt. Now we should pursue a very spiritual pursuit. So why are we getting involved in physical stuff? And then why did God want it this way, that things become holy and all these mitzvahs, and not like the forefathers did it, which the things didn't become holy and they were able to do it in a spiritual sense? Why didn't God leave it that way? And this is what the answer is. We have to say because we were slaves, we were in bondage to Pharaoh in Egypt. This bondage and slavery was in the most physical, back-breaking labor. And it was in the nakedness of the land. It was Sin City. It was in terms of it was a depraved society. It was called Erva Sa'aretz, the lowest of the low. Egypt had all types of things there, and they enslaved us. And in this place, they were slaves to the king of Egypt and the people of Egypt. Number one, because they were slaves in such a low place, that's their reason and the explanation of why the ascension and the exodus out of Egypt, out of that low point, was with such great revelation from God. That God came on his own, and when it says he came on his own, from those loftiest levels. Because this carnal, physical world, that is the lowest world, is nothing lower than this world. From here we can reach the highest points by, like we've said, like Chassidus teaches, by negating and abstaining from what we're not supposed to do with the physical world, and doing what we're supposed to do, the mitzvahs that are to be performed with the physical in this world. The Ashleima, you can take this to the bank. You could say, Shezeh kosher imaklal yadua. This is connected with the famous point of Kabbalah and Chassidus. Whatever was very high falls down very low. So that some of the things that are, let's say, inanimate here in their root are higher than the animate and the growing in the roots, because it falls further away. An analogy would be if there's a brick wall and it was to topple down, so the highest bricks will fall furthest away from where the wall was standing, and the lowest bricks will be basically in the same spot. And then the second level will go a little further, etc., etc. So, therefore, if we were so low, then the revelation has to be very high to take us out. And what we're going to is also going to be elevating the world and ourselves to a very high level. So if we fell so low, to such a low level, to be slaves in Egypt, and especially like it's explained in several places in Chassidus, the Bali Lulav today also explains, the one whose yahrzeit is, that in the lowest spot, where there's nothing lower than it, there can be found the one which is higher than being defined by what level they are, if they're up or down. In the lowest spot, you can see then something which doesn't make a difference, and therefore it's not defined if it's low, if it's high. Again, the one that's higher than the whole idea of definition of lower and lower and higher is in the lowest spot. It really makes no difference there. So therefore, in the lowest place, in a situation when we were slaves, when Israel was in a situation of slavery, there was the revelation of the Holy One, the King of Kings, because it doesn't matter. In other words, in the lowest spot, that's where you can go. It doesn't matter. The highest could be there too. Not only that, so that would include the whole scale of all the chain of all the worlds, going from the highest, God Himself, stooping to going down, I should say, to the lowest, to scoop up the Jews and take them out. And as it's explained many places, because we say this in the Haggadah, and Chassidus expounds on this, we don't just say God took us out. We say the King, who's the King of kings. So there's already levels here. A king who's just a king. Then there's a king who's a king of other kings. Then there's the king of the king who's the king of other kings, who is the Holy One. He's not only the Holy One, he's the Holy One who's blessed, and there's He. Blessed be He. So, the various levels. And so, the God going from the deepest level to this lowest place includes all those levels of godliness, and then when God's essence comes down, when even that is submitted to the highest level, everything is part of it. It's all part of the big essence of God. That's why this is the answer that we say we were slaves, the answer to the question of the wise son. And because the lowest place, the highest, can go down and make for the revelation. Therefore, at that point, we were commanded on the physical mitzvahs. Like the mitzvah of bringing the Passover offering, where they actually were commanded to do this while they were still in Egypt. And what is the wording that it says? And we read this on Pesach. It says, Mishchu ukhu lachem tzoin. Mishchu means draw and take for yourself sheep. So our sages say in the Medrash, Mishchu, what do you mean draw? Mishchu yidech me'aved zara. Draw away your hands from idol worship. V'davku b'mitzvahs, and they should cleave to mitzvahs. Hainu shalokhu esatle shoyaved zara shel Mitzrayim. They took the lamb, which was the deity of Egypt, and the idol of Egypt. That was the lowest of the low. They took some. They were serving something. And they transformed the deity, and from that they performed a mitzvah, and they made that the mitzvah of the Passover offering. And this was actually something which they had to eat, and they had to eat the whole thing, and etc. Together with the testimonial and the statute and the laws that are all associated with the Pesach. And that's why it is with all the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are made up of various levels of what we call klippa, the way the world is created, and various potentials. And like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, certain things, the only way we can help it is by negating it and abstaining from it. The things that are made from the three klippas, which are completely impure. And when Mashiach comes, they'll take on another dimension. But up until then, the only way that could be, it's not even elevated, but the world is elevated by us from abstaining, from partaking, or doing things associated with those klippas. For that matter, we can also transform things that had come from the neutral klippa, and we turn it into something to serve God with it. Then we're elevating the world. So it's all done with physical. Physical started out low, but we can elevate it. We can elevate everything in the world, but it's only through the physical. Excuse me. This is what he explains in the continuation of the Maimer. It says, the sages teach us, the ethics of the fathers, that one moment of repentance and return and good deeds in this world is nicer and better than all of the life in the world to come. Life in the world to come, you could see God and perceive God, and everything feels good, everything's wonderful. Here things are tough. But here we're actually bringing such a great revelation of godliness that it's greater. The struggle for even a moment here of doing a mitzvah, and the mitzvah comes with a struggle. And somebody, not every mitzvah has the same struggle as every other mitzvah, but every individual knows, we all know that we struggle with something. Somebody who says they have no struggle is either a great tzaddik or the delusional. Now, even a great tzaddik says they have a struggle, because they have to struggle. We know about this, not from experience, just because we learned about it, that they have to elevate, and they're able to be in touch with God, who's infinite, and therefore they can elevate things more and more and more. That's their problem. We struggle with doing what we're supposed to and abstaining from what we're not supposed to do, and doing it better in quality and in quantity. And here the Rebbe is giving us some strength, and he's telling us, get in tune with the time, the space, and the energy of the season of Pesach, of the Exodus, of the birth, and focus on the fact that we were in a low down place, doing low down work, and we were brought out of there, but with a goal that there may be struggle, but now the accomplishment will be with a holy purpose, and will be elevating the world. It will be sanctifying the world and turning the world into a holy place. So that's a transformation. And then when we struggle, and then we overcome our struggles, we overcome the obstacles, we overcome the hindrances, then there's growth, and then there's elevation, then there's ascension. So the Rebbe says here, the Teva Selam Habo, we say that what's going on in the world to come, right, is the whole thing there doesn't come to 1 hour of what we're doing here. There are two explanations of what Olam Haba means, the world to come. Aleph, the Koyal Gan Eden. One means paradise, the Garden of Eden. That means that when somebody passes on, the soul continues its ascensions, and it has a level and goes to a place called paradise. Maybe it needs some cleansing somewhere along the way, in heaven forbidden, purgatory, or whatever it may be. But there's a goal that our soul goes to Gan Eden, like we pray, that the soul should be resting and basking in the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden. So that's one part of Olam Haba, that's one way it is. The second thing that Olam Haba is a reference to is Olam Atchiyah. The Koyal Olam Atchiyah, when there will be the resurrection, Mashiach comes. And about both of them, the Rebbe says that this is what the Chazal mean when they say, Sheyofa Shoachas Ve'elam Hazbekol Chai Olam Haba. This struggle now is going to be better than everything. So you might ask, here's the big question, then why do we want Mashiach to come? Oh, because they're commensurate. They work together. That's why, like it says in chapter 37 in Tanya, what's going to be then is from what we're doing now. So we're going to thank God later that He made it tough now. So it is tough now. So it's a little bit like it says that what's greater, learning or doing? So they say learning. Why? Because it brings you to do. So they really are working off each other. So that's what the Rebbe says here. Because specifically through what we do here, physically in this low world, like it says, that God demands us today. What was today? Today means to actually do it, like the sages teach us. From this we draw down the greatest energy that can be drawn, the most highest type. And through this we have the whole idea that Pesach becomes, like it's referred to, Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. And so when we say the Amidah on Pesach, we say this is the time of our freedom. The Rebbe so often wished people that the freedom should be freedom of anxiety, freedom of hindrance, freedom of worry, freedom of things that bother you, etc. The Rebbe wrote this in many, many letters. So the Rebbe is saying here, through this understanding and awareness and cognizance of the deeper meaning of the Exodus, and what the question is of the wise son, and what the answer is, that we went out of one place for a goal. This brings true freedom. And like it says, Pesach, God passes over the opening, the doorways to the Jewish homes that had the blood of the Korban Pesach on the lintel and on the doorposts, and therefore there wasn't the plague that that took place in the rest of Egypt. So now it's freedom. God is continuously, it's the season of God jumping, so to speak. He doesn't hold us back even like a blink of an eye. The redemption comes immediately. The Rebbe says, like he's skipping and jumping, like hopping and jumping. And brought to us even sooner, like we read the Haftarah on the last day of Pesach, that from Isaiah 60, that the redemption could come either at the time or could come sooner. We make it come faster. So Pesach comes along, we have the right focus, everything's a jump. We can jump into that redemption, Varuim and Anishmaya, and like it says in Daniel, flying on the clouds of heaven, Begula Amitis Vashlema, with the true, full redemption, Ayidei Mashiach Tzidkenu, through our righteous Mashiach, Ubenissan Heini Golin, like it says in the Talmud, that we were redeemed in Nissan, and we will be redeemed in Nissan. And we'll have the redemption. Chaim.
Um,